What's up, friends? How are you today? Happy Thursday, July 2nd, to everybody listening. Hopefully, you're having a fantastic start to your morning, as I know I absolutely am, as I get TikTok up and running here as well. Hello, hello to the people running on in here as we kick off the Thursday edition of Outside the Box. What's up, Aaron? What's up, Jar Manny? I can always count on you guys being here early as the show kicks off here, which I appreciate very much. Hello, Carla. Hello, Canary. Hello to everybody on the Minocqua Brewing Company Substack. Thank you very much for welcoming me into your homes, cars, apartments, wherever the hell you may be watching me today, prison cells, whatever the situation is. Um, very happy to be here with you guys today. Plenty to get into over the course of the next 2 hours, 2-ish hours. And looking forward to doing so with as many of you guys as I possibly can. Well, thank you, Miss Canary, for the gifts. I appreciate the support as I continue building an independent media stream here, and I welcome everybody to check out my bio on YouTube, check out my link tree on my Facebook page. If you click that, there is an opportunity for you to financially throw a couple bucks my way as I kind of get this stuff off the ground. We're a month or so away from having sponsors on this program. I'm going to be cutting some ads pretty soon here. It's going to be a pretty official feeling show as we continue moving on. So if anybody finds himself with the capacity to do so, I do appreciate that. A couple of you guys took it upon yourselves to do so yesterday. And I try and send you all private messages because it really does mean a lot. And I individually type those messages. When you guys saw me all over Facebook telling everybody about my YouTube channel, that wasn't AI or anything like that. I was manually typing all of those messages to everybody because I genuinely appreciate the support. So the least I can do is actually take some time to write to you guys. So if you enjoyed the show, you find yourself in a position to be able to donate, check my links on Facebook, check my description of my show on YouTube. You'll see my link tree right there, and Venmo's like the second or third one from the top. So I will have the Cash App and all the other ones. Apparently, I'm outdated just having Venmo. So I will work my way up to having some more options here. So, who saw the World Cup game yesterday? That was my first full soccer game that I have ever watched in my entire life. And I have to say, I enjoyed it. I don't think you guys expected that, but I did enjoy it. I think that game had a little bit of everything. It had excitement, it had drama, it had bad calls, it had shorthanded goals, it had a lot of things. And thank you very much, Ali, for the support there. Yeah, everybody click the little thumbs up under my videos there. Please share these. Please subscribe. Do all the things you can to help it out. Aaron saying soccer is fun to watch when you know the sport. Nah, I mean, I was watching the sport at one point. America had a goal called back, and I called it high sticking. I don't actually know what the call was. I didn't have the volume on because I was doing my evening live while the game was on. But called it high sticking. I understand enough about soccer to get the basics about what's going on. I just never found it to be particularly enthralling. I will say the announcers act like every shot's going to go in. So you're like sitting there, you're on your iPad, and you're like prepping tomorrow morning's show. And then you see the guy like screaming. He's like, oh, and he's got a chance. And you look up and it's like 7 feet to the left of the goal. And you're like, bro, like, come on. Well, that you didn't think that was going in. None of us thought that was going in. And yeah, there was a halftime. It's not an intermission. Although, okay, so what's funny is I was asking because I didn't know. I said, does soccer have a halftime or not? And then I said, I feel like soccer would call it the long pause. And everybody thought that was really funny. They were like, that actually sounds like something soccer would do. And then I get to the second half and they have something called the hydration break, which is just a commercial. Like, oh, we're about 3 minutes away from the hydration break. And I'm like, Okay, so they do have weird names for stuff. I should have saw that coming. But now they do have a halftime, and it flies by. Bada bing, bada boom. EW says soccer flops are the best, even less believable in the NBA. They're bad. They're really bad. It actually takes me out of the game a little bit because I'm not much of an NBA guy either. I've adopted the Bucks as my team just because I'm coming from a city that didn't have a team. But um, they're rough. It feels like every time they fall, it's the worst injury. And I get it. They run more in that game than I intend to run in 2026. You know what I mean? But um, I feel like they flop sometimes just to not have to run for like 3 minutes. You know what I mean? Like I swear to God, like I can't prove that, but I'm like, he just needs a break. That's all that is. We say that shit in football all the time. You know, like when they get up and like you can tell they're fine, and then you can like you see them, they just like, oh, ooh, ooh, and they get down like that. And you know they weren't hurt, but it's before the final 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. Quarterback's running a hurry up offense. You're just getting dog walked up and down the field. And then you just take a knee. You just take a knee. Everybody on the defense gets like 45 seconds to a minute and a half just to chill for a second. You plan the next couple plays out, and you move on from there. My TikTok chat is already telling me they're clipping my show today, so that's going to be interesting in and of itself. There, they said they're clipping the faces and things that I'm doing. Uh, CKK says the hydration break is just to sell ads. They didn't exist till Fox got the rights to the World Cup. Okay, so that makes more sense. I understand why it exists. I'm saying the hydration break just is a ridiculous name. And maybe it's because I'm not used to it. Like if I were watching American football for my first time and they were like 2 minute warning, I'm like, what? Why the what? Why do I care that it's a 2 minute warning? I don't know. Is it maybe just that I'm used to it? But when I saw the hydration break, I'm like, of course, soccer's commercials is called the hydration break. Like that feels like what soccer would do. But it was exciting. Glad they won. If you guys haven't seen my Facebook video yet, I did kind of highlight, and I got a private message actually from somebody um, on Instagram who doesn't know me, doesn't even know that I host a show, just saw the video and wanted to take an opportunity to comment. And he was very polite. I'm not mocking him in any stretch of the imagination. Um, he was like, because I made a video and I said, it kind of feels like when you're watching America do well at the World Cup, it feels like you're cheering for District 1 to win in the Hunger Games. Like, oh, here comes the guy who's been trained since birth in the highest of high tech labs with all of the best equipment you could ever possibly imagine, not wanting for anything, always having food in his belly, ready to take on the world in the Hunger Games. And here comes Katniss Everdeen from District 12, had to hunt for her own food, had to escape violence to be here. Boy, we sure hope District 1 wins. That Katniss, it's not her year this year. Like that's how I feel cheering for America in the World Cup. And I'm still going to do it. I'm still pulling for America. One of my best friends always told me the most inside the box thing about me is that I pull for the home team always. Like I'm a Pittsburgh guy because I was born in Pittsburgh and I hate New England. But if I had been born in Boston, I absolutely would love the New England Patriots. Like it's kind of like patriotism if you think about it. But so I am pulling for America, but it's almost like if the Death Star had a bad soccer team. And then one year they were like, oh, we might make the Elite Eight this year for the first time in decades. And it's like, oh, that's good because normally the Death Star's team is always bad. And I live on the Death Star. So, like, I want them to exceed at this soccer game. But I did watch us completely annihilate a planet for basically no reason other than to make a point, and I don't know that we're the good guys. If they made a movie about this World Cup, America would not be the good guys. But we will make a movie if we win, and we will absolutely be the good guys. You know what I mean? And that is kind of the lens through which I was watching that game. You could feel it in the audience because it's home field advantage. So obviously, there's a lot of Americans in the audience cheering for us. But you could tell everybody else, even the people that weren't from Bosnia, Like you could tell everybody else was into it. Um was into America not winning, I mean. And I was like, now that I'm watching this through this lens, I kind of again, it doesn't ruin it for me. I'm still an America guy, but it just I'm being told I have a funny comment on Facebook about it. I'm trying to see if I can find it while I'm talking to you guys here. But yeah, leave it to me to find something that everybody is just super freaking excited about and won't stop talking about all day, only for me to come along and ruin it. It's basically what I was put on this earth to do, if you stop and think about it. But I do hope we win against Belgium. Belgium, who are they? They're another first world country. I'm fine beating them. Beating Bosnia felt bad. You know what I mean? I was just like, we've been bad on we have a bad history with Bosnia. Like I can feel that. But so I digress. I at least wanted to touch on that. I watched the game. USA. This is why Fox News does all these segments about how you know how many Americans under 40 aren't proud of America? I'm proud of America. I just you know, I'm self-aware enough to recognize what's going on. Braden says, nah, no win feels bad. I'm not even saying it feels bad, Braden. I'm just saying a little bit of self-awareness goes a long way. It's what this show's predicated on. Not telling anybody to feel bad about rooting for America or America winning. It's just a thing that I noticed. I'm gonna bring you up, Larry. I recognize sometimes people are accidentally asking to join because it's close to the like button. Feel free to just not say anything if that was an accident, but did you have something to say? Okay, I figured it was an accident. That's fine. I feel like I might have to put the kibosh on TikTok guests for a while because it seems like that happens by accident quite a bit. Canary says one of America's biggest problems is the huge lack of self awareness. And I would 1000% agree with that sentiment. And I've done segments on my old show about it plenty of times. I believe self awareness is the only reason I've made it as far in life as I can be. Aaron, the intern's calling me a freaking buzzkill on YouTube right now. I feel like self awareness is the only reason I've gotten as far as I have in life. And I think it helps you grow and it helps you kind of evolve as a human. And like just recognizing the way the world looks right now. Hell, I made the joke before I got fired. I said watching um, Iran and America play in the same tournament, it's like watching Mario and Bowser race cars around one another. It's like we obviously aren't on the same. We are frustrated with one another right now, and we're going to put our differences aside and play a good old game of soccer, of football. I don't know that I buy it. But so on to the news of the day, of course. And speaking of self awareness, I wanted to start here because I have a feeling that nobody else in media is going to cover it. So I feel like this is the best place to start. We do have guests coming in at 9:30. I actually have to create a link right now as I'm talking, and then Mallory, I will hit your comment right after that. But we do have two guests coming in, more surrounding the idea of surveillance. One person part of an anti-flock group, and another person coming with counterterrorism experience. And I realize that TikTok isn't going to like that word, but I also recognize that I don't care, and I need to be able to talk the way I need to talk, and that is the position that she had in the armed forces. Bringing a little bit of expert knowledge to the conversation in ways that I'm very excited to share with all of you guys. I met these ladies about a month ago at the first flock meeting that I went to, and I invited them to be on my radio show at that point, and we weren't in a position to set something up before the great exit. So that's been my experience then. Well, 1 second here. These are the type of moments eventually I'm going to need somebody to just fire these off for me at some point because I always feel bad when I have to stop talking to you guys to bang those out really quickly. So Mallory says, and what's up, old lib? I was lucky enough to have excellent social studies teachers and actually listen in class that helped shape me who I am today. Very self-aware. I am embarrassed to say that I didn't learn that in high school. Um, it took life knocking me in my ass. What's up, Nataki? For me to be able to view life through the lens that I do today. Sometimes you need to get humbled a little bit. You don't realize you're on the top of the food chain when you're growing up, you know? But that's just been my experience. I am sharing a link here. Please, nobody use this link until after 9:30. I'm sharing this for when Malia ends up getting in the chat, and I might have to share it a second time. But they will be taking part in the conversation at 9:30 to talk about Flock. That gives me 15 minutes to jump into the first story of the day. And I think you guys will find this interesting. Back in November of 25, there were a handful of Democratic victories that kind of gave everybody the excitement. What's up, Violet? Surrounding Democratic momentum in this nation and kind of putting this Republican movement to bed because nobody is happy with the way things are trending outside of the diest of diehard cult members. Abigail Spanberger won the governor's race in Virginia, and Zohran Mamdani won the mayor of New York. And people were talking about the distinct differences between the two of them, and they are very different. And I only just talked yesterday about how Spanberger was actually nominated through delegates and not through a popular vote of the states, because the Democrats are the defenders of democracy until you want to vote for somebody that's going to tax billionaires, in which case they probably know better than what you want. But so there's been a lot of comparisons between the two, and I actually have a story that highlights the similarities between the two and how, without good leadership from up top, you're never really going to be able to make the kind of changes that you need to see the kind of positive change that you're looking for. Case in point, both Virginia and New York City right now have declarations telling them the energy grid is strained. We are going to get through this as a team. We're going to get through this together. Now, you know, the elites and wealthiest people among us are not turning down their air conditioning. They are absolutely just using it to their own devices. And eventually, we may be headed towards a reality where you no longer have control of that. And that's something to be concerned about down the line. I think that's something worth highlighting. But what I would like to highlight for you guys is this. Yeah, no. First of all, we're going to go into the way back machine. So back when Joe Biden was in office, and I've done this segment over a half a dozen times for people, because Democrats are the ones that warn about climate change, right? They're the ones that want you to believe that they're the ones that are going to put a stop to this. Republicans are the ones that tell you that's a myth. What science? I only just learned to read yesterday. We don't have enough proof that this is going on. And I've always stated I do not have kids. If people want to be serious about climate change, let's get serious about climate change. But I'm not going to sit there. People are asking what the point of this story is. You new here, it all ties together. Don't you worry, sit tight. When you see Democrats tell you drink out of paper straws, but then they use private jets to go places, it's hard to take them seriously. And every time Republicans take control, they kneecap any type of green initiatives in the name of profiting for oil and gas companies. If we're serious about this, then let's get serious about this. But I also don't have kids. So if we'd rather just use all the resources for the next 40 years and leave a hellscape for whoever's coming after us, right on. Let's just do that instead then. But like, no more of this half in, half out. Democrats either mean business or they don't. And you know what contributes to climate change? Data centers. You either mean business or you don't. Let me know which one you want to do, and I'm happy to jump on board with that. You want to party until the world falls apart, or you want to pull together and stop this from happening? Either one of those are viable options as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to let you guys pick which one you'd rather do. Now, what does this have to do with Mom Donnie and Abigail Spanberger and the fact that you're not allowed to use energy? When Joe Biden was in office, China was heavily investing in their solar panels to the point where they were able to produce solar panels that they could sell around the world at the cheapest price you could possibly imagine. They were so cheap that America put sanctions on solar panels coming from China because they said if China can sell solar panels for that cheap, we are never going to be able to compete with what they are doing. So, in other words, we'd rather not expand our access to solar because American companies will not profit on it. So, either the world falls apart or Americans are going to get rich fixing the problem. Those are the only two options. And that was when the Democrats had a trifecta. I've talked about this before, but in 2024, via solar energy, China generated 25% of the energy demand that America had in 2025. Now, it's not apples to apples. Their energy demand is way bigger. Their population is 3 times the size of ours, at least on paper, so on and so forth. I understand it's not apples to apples, but I'm saying the solar energy that they generated would have been able to account for 25% of America's energy supply. You starting to see where this is going yet? Now let's go to Spain for a second. This was reported as of 2 days ago in Bloomberg News. Bear with me here. Of course, I didn't have it up and ready to go. According to Bloomberg 2 days ago in Spain, there we go. Spain has built too much solar and the investors won out. After plowing $80 billion into renewables in Spain, the country has too much electricity at this point on sunny days. So let me get this straight now. So investors are pulling out of solar panels now because it's working too effectively. American governments are sanctioning Chinese companies because they are generating solar panels at too cheap of a cost for us to be able to compete economically. And yet in New York and in Virginia, whether you are where the Democratic Socialist is or the Blue MAGA CIA agent, both of those individuals find themselves telling their citizens, turn your air conditioners to 78 degrees. You know what mine's at right now? 68 degrees. It's not on because it's too loud. I turn it off when I'm talking to you guys, but it's hot as shit right now. It's up in 100 degrees 3 days in a row in New York City, over that. And they are saying that their energy grid is being strained as a result of everybody using their air conditioners. And we are being told, guys, we're going to get through this how we get through everything together. Because that's how Democrats do things, right? They do it from a friendly perspective, but it still is an awful situation. Like I always tell you, Republicans just embrace authoritarianism. They embrace fascism. They're like, yeah, give me the masked Virgin RV unaliving Americans in the middle of the street. Maybe they should have just stayed home and let them scoop up all damn Mexicans. Democrats always do the same kind of stuff, but through a friendly veneer. And let's just say veneers are falling down left, right, and center, both in the political world as well as my personal life. And I see through the veneers at this point. There are countries that are figuring this out. There is a very famous MIT study that shows that if we invested too much in solar panels, that it would be impossible to monetize energy. So rather than allowing the sun to power our nation, to power our society, and do it at cost, we would rather continue paying the exponentially higher prices for energy. And then when shit hits the fan, when it gets too hot and cities that have millions of people in it all want to turn their AC on at the same time, they get declarations from up top telling them that they're going to need to keep their AC at 78 in order to make sure that we don't overpower the grid. Turn off any lights that you might not be using. Now, don't get me wrong, we should be doing that anyway. You should just be doing that. You shouldn't be turning out, you shouldn't be walking out with your TV on. You should not be leaving your lights on when you're not in the room. But that doesn't change the fact that there is a solution to these problems that doesn't involve us having to live without having to go without energy, having to reduce our grid. We saw what happened in Texas before any of the Republicans listened to me be like, see, Ben, this is what happens with those liberal governments. The exact same thing happens in Texas. That's where Cancun Cruz comes from. That's why people say Ted Cruz goes to Cancun, because if you remember, that's when the energy grid collapsed. And of course, they're going to blame the Green New Deal, the Green New Scam, if you will, when in reality, Joe Biden set the record for oil and gas drilling in 2023 and in 2024. Malia, I just threw the link in the chat there. Just punch that in your browser and I will see you backstage and I'll bring you up in a moment. There are the Democrats, while investing mildly in renewable energy, were also contributing to the problem as well. Aaron says in Minnesota, they pay people for their excess solar energy. Exactly. The Republican Party has done a great job propagandizing people against their own best interest, against what would be a cheaper option. All of us are seeing the energy prices rise, and we're also seeing energy companies rake in record profits. And yet the Republican Party is going to blame the fact that we built 7 electric vehicle chargers somewhere for the reason why why the energy prices are going up. Meanwhile, we are watching other countries master this technology as we are looking at the technologies of the past, claiming that that is the best path forward. How about instead of investing $1.5 trillion in our Defense Department and cutting taxes for billionaires, we take all that money, invest it in solar, and start finding workarounds to these issues? Because Spain now has excess energy. They have too much energy when the sun is up. We need to work on solar. We need to work on storage. We need to work on all of these different issues. We Energies, CKK is saying in the chat, also buys the energy as well. And also says, remember that Fox News blamed the Texas grid collapse on windmills. Exactly. Exactly. They demonize renewable energy sources. Meanwhile, and I swear to God, I'll never be able to prove it because, corporate restructuring. But my main line of thinking in terms of energy was, you're finding out that the technology exists, that you're able to power society with the wind and the sun, and 40% of us gets mad at that idea. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying that we can write off oil and gas or nuclear or geothermal or any of the other types of energy out there that exists. What I'm saying is, right now, China is creating 25% of the energy demand that we have and providing solar panels for a cost that we could not possibly even begin to comprehend. And instead of scooping all those up and putting them everywhere, we sanction them and make them cost 5 times as much so that people don't go and buy them. Is there an energy crisis or isn't there? Because I don't know how much more oil and gas drilling we can do, and I cannot stress enough, it is a finite resource. The sun will be there until it explodes, and then we have much bigger problems on the other side of that. Jake says lower costs for consumers for a better product. Isn't that what capitalism is supposed to do? Isn't it funny that all the stuff that capitalism is supposed to promote, capitalism actually hates? Like, it hates competition. It hates cheap products. It hates all of these all of the things that it claims to promote. And I don't understand why. And Carrie, I see you backstage. Malia, we're waiting on you to hop on there. We'll bring you up in 1 second here. Just let me finish my thought on renewable energy for a second here. We have the solutions to these problems. And Carrie, I don't know if you have Malia's contact. If you want to send her the same thing I sent you, I put it in the chat. But if not, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. We have the solutions to these problems, and we are choosing not to do them. Susan, who lives in California, says, my AC is set at 77. I'm upstairs. My apartment bakes because costs are crazy in California. Exactly. Exactly. And then you find out in Spain, they are actually pulling investor dollars out of renewable energy because they're making it so cheap that the people investing in it can't figure out how to make a product. So in other words, it's so cheap that you physically cannot profit off of it, which means Waka Waka, we should be nationalizing the energy companies, doing it via solar and wind as a complement to the energy infrastructure that already exists. And then we go from there. This ain't complicated. The government is making it complicated. And then 40% of our government tells you that climate change is a myth and that renewable energy is a scam, and 60% tells you it's important to do it, but it also is important to do it so that companies can still make billions of dollars off of you. And those are the two options that you vote between every single year in terms to energy renewal. Thank you for joining the party, Swanee. All right. Switching gears here, one of our two guests are here, and Malia, I'm going to post the link again in the comments to see if we can get you in there. You just punch that link into your browser, and then it'll allow you to type your name in. It's a pretty straightforward thing from there. Up there she is. All right, perfect. We're going to add a couple people to the stage here. I think I got to go to the 3-person screen. Let's see if that works. It's my first time pulling something like this here. Bada bing, bada boom. All right, wonderful stuff. Thank you very much for joining us, both of you. We are here with Carrie and Malia. I have met both of you about a month ago at my first flock meeting.
That's right.
And what's funny is people tell me, Ben, we love your energy towards these surveillance cameras. You're such an important voice in the matter. I said, no. Please understand. I am a megaphone, but I am not the one that has this information. It's the people doing the work every single day, and that's who you guys are. Carrie, we'll start with you because you got here first, but I want to hear a little bit about both of your experience, what makes you interested in the topic, and then we'll get into our consternation surrounding the issue here on the other side of that. So, Carrie, without further ado, go ahead.
Thanks, Ben. I'm a big fan of your show. This is a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
I got started on this issue. Honestly, I was interested in a few other local issues here in Oshkosh. That's where I'm located. But I kind of got pulled into this when a group of citizens had to wait until all hours, early hours of the morning to talk on this topic, 6 to 7 hours of wait time. Malia was there to address our council on the topic of the flock renewal. I'm personally very interested in this. I care about my rights. I care about my Fourth Amendment rights. And to me, this technology is a huge violation of our privacy and horribly needs regulation. It's not okay for third-party vendors to have this kind of information stored insecurely, and it's not okay for law enforcement agencies to be sharing it so broadly without discretion. So when I saw that group of citizens and their passion, I wanted to join in and have made a lot of friends along the way in this journey the past several months.
Yeah, and then Malia, I personally approached you after the first time I saw you speak because you come at this with an entirely different perspective that I think gives you some unique input into the matter here. So maybe a little bit about your past and how that lends itself to being able to speak on the matter.
Right. So my background, I'm a Air Force intelligence analyst veteran. I worked in counterterrorism. So my whole job was to find, fix, and finish. The way you accomplish that is to establish a baseline pattern of life. I have not personally worked with Flock, but I've worked with its competitor, Palantir. So Palantir Flock, they provide essentially the same service. So when I was trained on Palantir, I was told, to never use it against American citizens because it is spying. It is a violation of your Fourth Amendment constitutional right. And I will go to prison if I ever use those skills and those tools on American citizens. I had been unplugged from what was going on locally. And one day I just see a call to action for Flock and I knew what it was. And I was just horrified that it was in my community and that it was active. And so, like Carrie said, I saw the call to action. I showed up and we waited a long 7 hours. And I'm so grateful that we waited as long as we did because that's how our whole grassroots organization started. Now Flock wants to call us these activists or whatever, but truly it's just a variety of people who cared and showed up and said, not on my watch.
Yeah, that's kind of been my main talking point on the matter the entire time, is we're referred to as an echo chamber. Like I said, if this hadn't happened, the three of us never would be having this conversation right now. Although Malia, I am interested, and we'll jump into other political content a little bit later on here because you cover quite a bit of topics there.
You.
But so we had yesterday I had alderperson Brian Defferding on the program, who has been one of the only people on those panels, as you both know, who has kind of been um, advocating for the same kind of things that we are here. And as you guys know, there's been an effort to move things behind closed doors. Now, there was a meeting yesterday that I was unable to attend. Did either of you? I didn't get a chance to ask.
I was
You were
there.
there, Carrie. Please
Yeah, I was.
share what took place there then. And Malia, if you were as well, follow after.
I was not.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah, so Flock was added to the agenda pretty short notice. I believe that was Monday. And part of the issue with short notice additions to council agendas is it really limits public participation in the matter. Brian Defferding made a post online Tuesday morning, I believe it was, sort of outlining his concerns about the fact that not only was this item added short notice to the council agenda, but it was added as a closed session item. So that was the big objection that he had, is that this would be discussed behind closed doors. Brian raised concerns at the council meeting about that. When there was a vote to go into closed session, there were 3 votes voting no, but the overwhelming majority of Nina's council voted to go into closed session, and Brian refused to participate. So he was not present during the closed session meeting last night. So we don't know. According to state law, there should be impending, or I can't remember the exact phrasing, but impending or current or litigation. And so far, we don't have any kind of evidence that that's happening in Nina. That was one question Brian had for the mayor during the meeting, is can you provide any kind of concrete evidence that there's impending litigation? And to be fair, the terms of the Nina contract are quite different about ending a contract early than the Appleton contract. The Appleton contract, they did end early, well, they're attempting to end early, and they've done a stop payment order. I was at that council meeting previous week. So there's a stop payment order. The cameras are now bagged in Appleton, which is really exciting. That's a new development in the last few days. They're taking swift action now. But in Nina, apparently the terms of the contract have penalties for ending a contract early, unlike the Appleton contract. You could end at any time. So perhaps there could be litigation. It seems highly unlikely to me, but that's what I heard yesterday at the meeting.
So yeah, to piggyback off of what Carrie said, if Flock chooses to do a lawsuit, well, then that opens them up to discovery, and then we get to validate heat maps, pattern of life, end-to-end encryption. I don't see them pursuing a lawsuit, especially in the Fox Valley.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in my opinion, it speaks volumes that they had to take it behind closed doors, because I think no matter what kind of broad brush they try to paint us with, it seems as though the pushback is working. The getting the message out there is working. Regardless of your political allegiance, nobody wants to feel like they're being spied on. And some people view it as a lost cause, right? Like, we're currently doing this right now. You're on TikTok, you're on YouTube, you're on Facebook. We're getting scraped by the algorithm right now. You know what I mean? And they're going to use this. We're all on a list, is what I oftentimes joke. If you're on this show, you're on a list. But that defeatist attitude doesn't get us where we need to go. And I think the fact that they had to do it behind closed doors means they don't want us seen, because they know that we can probably debunk whatever it is that they're doing. Malia, the first time I went, I chickened out on saying it. The second time I went, I said it. I talked about the Flock cameras, Palantir's relationship and I have to talk funny because we're on TikTok, so please excuse my vernacular, but our allies in the Middle East, using Palantir, using Flock cameras in order to essentially predict whether or not somebody was going to be a problem for them down the line. I saw through one of your social posts, I believe on Instagram, that in Milwaukee, this is no longer a theory anymore. protesters for our friends in Gaza are now being monitored through the same way. So we're kind of no longer operating in the hypothetical anymore, and something that I was nervous to say for being labeled as a conspiracy theorist barely a month ago is now being borne out to be true in our own state. And it stands to reason we should probably expect something similar in our neck of the woods were this to be allowed to continue down this pipeline.
Yeah, anecdotally, I don't recall what country this woman origin or her origins are from, but she's a nun and she was walking home and ICE detained her. She's a nun. She doesn't have a criminal record. So then, of course, they released her. I'll get that to you just so you can have the story if you want to talk about it later. But it just blew my mind that a nun was detained. And I can only assume that they had profiled her. And how did they profile her?
Right.
Is what I'm assuming.
Of course. All of this is assumed and alleged and whatnot. But so, Carrie.
I'm so sorry. My camera turned off.
Oh, no worries. And I'm sorry that my head is so big and you guys are so tiny. This is my first time having multiple guests on this new version of the show. So it's a learning curve for me a little bit here. And I don't want to push a bunch of buttons while I have you. But so, Carrie, in terms of the future, what can we do right now? There's more people waking up to this, more people becoming aware. Obviously, closed door sessions we can't sit in. How can people push back against this outside of the obligatory go vote?
There are so many ways. We need more citizens to get involved in this issue, and citizens getting involved in their own city is really important. Council members want to hear from residents in their city. They want to hear from the people that they represent. So getting involved with the own place you live is great. Emailing council members your concerns, emailing committee members your concerns. We were able to speak in very large numbers at one of the meetings you were at, Ben, at a meeting in Neenah. Over 30 people attended the public safety meeting there. It can have a tremendous impact. I see different pathways that our communities could go down post-flock. I'm hoping we can be in a post-flock existence in all three of these cities, Appleton, Neenah, and Oshkosh. We're certainly well on our way here in Oshkosh with the contract rescinded and Appleton with the cameras bagged. I would love to see people push for specific actionable items of their elected leaders. So one of those items could be ordinance to start curtailing the power of that these third-party vendors have with our legislators and with our law enforcement. We want to provide a framework for our city council members on how they can help establish parameters of what type of tech would be permissible and what type of guardrails would be needed to protect our privacy. So there is a citizen drafted ordinance circulating. Council members on all three of these councils have a copy of the citizen drafted ordinance. And one of the key drafters is a cybersecurity expert with 20 years experience in the field, which I think is really, really impressive. One of the, I can speak more about that, but I'm just trying to give you a higher level idea. One of the other tenets of the ordinance is to have an oversight committee for this tech in each of these jurisdictions. And I think that's really key. We need to have some types of checks and balances here. And the ordinance would also provide us with a framework for selecting a product. So instead of just being at the mercy of which company is going to give the best sales pitch, my view is that we need to be scoping the needs of our community first, scoping our privacy needs first, and then selecting a product to fit the needs of the people rather than just selecting a product that has a great energetic sales team attached to it. Sales can lie based on what we've seen Flock doing in our community, and they lie often and well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I draw on my own experience as a software salesperson. I was always over 100% a quota, and the one thing I can say consistently is I never had any idea how it worked. There were people that knew how it worked that came with me. So when they send salespeople to try and convince us, no, let me explain the tech end, I'm like, I know from personal experience you don't know what you're talking about. So,
well, there was the guy at the last Neenah meeting that we had all been at together. He was very emphatic that the license plate reader only takes a photo of the back of your car. And if another system puts it all together and creates that pattern of life, that's another system. That's Flock Nova. That's a service that you sell. It's a service that they have access to. Stop lying to us.
I agree. I agree. I actually, that meeting, I came with 404 Media's reporting that block cameras had the capacity to monitor semiconductor chips. So the chips in your phone, your car, your pet, all these different places it can associate with that. So now it's no longer just who the car is registered to, it's everybody in the car.
And I want to mention that that's part of what's so strong about the citizen drafted ordinance is that it monitors other AI-driven surveillance technology. As a citizen, I'm concerned about more than just ALPR. I'm also concerned about things like signal trace or drone technology or a facial recognition technology. I don't want to be a part of a dragnet as an innocent person who's not out committing crimes, right? So I think we need to think bigger than Flock as a company. We need to look at ALPR in general, and then we need to zoom out even further and look at other forms of warrantless mass surveillance technology.
Yeah, we got a couple comments here. We have a listener in California. Flock is coming to Colusa, California. The city council officially approved a 2-year contract with Flock Inc. With the police department. Well, that's the one thing all these stories have in common is the police department is very much in favor of what's happening.
Of
And
course
oftentimes, yeah, and no offense to some of the older people in the audience, but oftentimes the older generation likes the idea of safety and being tough on crime or whatever the line of the day is. And I'm sure you two have noticed as much as I have. My feed has been inundated with Flock success stories over the course of the last couple of days here to kind of switch the thinking there. It's a slippery slope, and it's people like you two that and plenty of others, of course, that are speaking up here. And I can't suggest enough. People reach out. You see Carrie's name there. Malia is all over social media. I share the accounts, and there's plenty of people in the chat as well that are very vocal about what's going on here. So we are in a position to stand up against what's happening and push back. None of this is guaranteed as it stands right now. As you guys mentioned, the Nina situation might be a little stickier contractually until 2028, but by and large, you're seeing victories everywhere, which is a strong point. I actually want to hang on to Malia for a little bit to talk about something outside of Flock in the world of politics. But Carrie, before I let you go, is there anything that I forgot to mention to about what you know, or is there something you want to get out? We have a little over 120 people listening across all platforms right now. What's on your mind?
I want to piggyback on what you just shared about law enforcement wanting to preserve this tool. I think it's reasonable for law enforcement to want to have tools to do their job. And I think it's reasonable for people to be concerned about safety. I think how we scope safety can vary from person to person. So law enforcement might define it one way. A domestic abuse survivor who's concerned about having their patterns of life tracked might define it another. But the citizen drafted ordinance has provisions in it to allow law enforcement to utilize this tool. For example, without a warrant, 24 hours of data would be accessible for active investigations. And I think these are the kinds of compromises we need to be looking at and coming to these meetings with answers. And if your position is no LPR, reach out to your counsel and share that. If you think under no conditions this technology should be employed, you can also advocate for that. But just wanted to share, like, this really is a compromise. This is a robust piece of ordinance that was written, but it really is a compromise. And I hope that all of our elected leaders will look at it seriously.
I love it. You have my contact. Anytime you have any information, reach out and we'll get that rolling. Thank you very much for being here, Carrie. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, thank you. Take it easy. All right. And on to other things here. Malia, am I saying that right? Is it Malia or Malaya? Okay.
You are. But before we switch gears, there was just like two other things I wanted to add to the three, actually.
Yeah,
three things to add to the Flock thing. So you commented people have a defeatist attitude, and the story that I was telling someone who said the same thing was, if your car is being stolen, you feel pretty defeated, right? Like, oh my gosh. But do you just give up because they stole your car? No, you call 911, you call for help, you make a scene. That's what we're doing now. We are making a scene. We're writing our open records request. You're showing up and speaking in the council. So that's what you can do to kind of take the power back.
Yeah, I love that.
There was a Supreme Court case ruling earlier in the week. I forget the name of it, but essentially it rules the tool that Flock or ALPR systems themselves it is unconstitutional when a police officer accesses a public database without a warrant. So I've actually submitted a number of requests for statements from various city attorneys in the Fox Valley. So I'll be reporting on that when I get their statements back. And then the last thing is for your listeners, nationwide. I do have an article called DFLOC 101. It's a case story of how we were able to get flock out of our city, and it's meant for other cities nationwide to use it and scale our success.
Oh, wonderful. Out of curiosity, Susan has a question. If you don't have an answer, that's fine. We're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants here. The overall crime in Colusa County is roughly 50% below the national average. How is this justified? I'd argue the crime rates in the Fox Valley is probably below the national average as well. But are you seeing any kind of acknowledgement that, as they say, apparently the default argument is one crime is too many. So if one crime happens in your community, flock is necessary. Is that kind of the way you're hearing it described?
Same. I mean, not to minimize the crime that happens in the Fox Valley, but I'm born and raised from Las Vegas. So like the crime that I'm used to seeing and the crime that you guys see here is just so different. The community policing I see is more effective. Getting to the root cause of the issue, having safety nets for people helps prevent crimes. Flock cameras only help solve crimes after the fact.
Oh, sure, exactly. Yeah, I'm from Pittsburgh. I said the same thing. I'm from the city of Pittsburgh, so it's a bit
so you
different.
Get it.
Yeah, it's a bit different than what we deal with here. Although every trip I've had to Vegas, like it's almost over policed because they want to have the veneer that it's a happy, hunky-dory environment. And so I feel like as soon as you act out of pocket, they crack down on that real quick out there. Maybe I'm mistaken, at least on the main drag. But so you do a social media account called The Last 24 Hours, where you kind of break down the last 24 hours in the world of politics, and I kind of do the same thing over the course of 2 hours. So when I came across your content, I saw a lot of opportunity for overlap, and you and I kind of chatted off the air a little bit, and I think we can probably have some pretty good discussions going forward. And one I wanted to have with you as someone, and I'm not equating the two, but as somebody who just lost his position because he refused to change his belief on a number of different factors, among other reasons, corporate restructuring. The national story that I think is not getting nearly enough attention is one man in the armed forces who took it upon himself to call for the removal of the sitting president. And I figured, given your past experience, you could speak maybe a little bit to exactly how gutsy of a move that was and why what he did took the kind of courage that was necessary.
Yeah. So one thing that I saw in the video was a lot of Americans screaming out, like First Amendment rights. And who do you protect? Who do you serve? Yelling at the police officers that were arresting this Major Watson. And something that a lot of civilians don't understand is when you're in the military, you lose certain access to your First Amendment rights. So I believe it is Article 88 for officers. You cannot speak out against your commander-in-chief. The intent is for unit cohesion, one team, one fight, mission focus. So what the major did on Capitol steps in uniform, calling for the impeach, removal, conviction of the president is monumental. I think the last time in history this has ever happened was there was a service member protesting the Vietnam War, but he was in plain clothes marching. So this is very symbolic. And I mean, this man he'll be court-martialed. He'll very likely go to prison for this or sit in jail until he has a trial. This is huge.
What kind of sentence could that carry with it?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'll look into it.
Yeah, because I mean, it's just the nature. And for those of you, we really didn't do a great. I should have probably did a better job of setting it up. But all he was calling, what is it? It's 3 words. It's remove, impeach, prosecute, convict. Yeah, something to that effect. That's essentially what he was saying, and his life is completely turned up on end. But he knows what he's looking at, and knows that and knows the trajectory we're on. And he had the guts to go up there and say something about it. And I just figure, given when did you serve?
I served from 2009 to 2015.
Okay. Yeah, I figure you obviously would have some great insight into why that matters. And my last question for you before we move on, before I move on to other topics, and we hope you'll come back because this issue isn't going anywhere. Our allies in the Middle East, you have quite a few thoughts about them, and specifically in relation to what's been taking place in Iran over the course of the last, well, much longer than the last couple of months, but at least has been on our radar the last couple of months.
Right.
Um, um, you're starting to see a changing of the tide in regards to the attitudes there. The Democratic side of the thing, the left side of the equation, is 4 out of 5 people at this point kind of coalesces around the way you and I talk about it at this point, which is nice to see. Republicans, right wingers, as per usual, a little behind the 8 ball. They're coming around though, as they are often want to do. Just your thoughts in general, I guess, about the future of this conflict as we're in the middle of a ceasefire that feels very tenuous right now. That I don't know if it's going to last or not. I'm hopeful it is, and I try to avoid fear mongering on this program because I feel like a lot of media depends on people being scared to come back and listen, whereas I try to be informative. But your thoughts, in your own humble opinion, just based on your own time serving and the way you're seeing things progress here. So are we getting out of this soon? And is there a way for us to kind of operate with our allies in a way that doesn't get us embroiled in another multi-decade war?
All right. So I have a long answer for you here. So let me
Please.
write your 2 questions down. So
Yeah.
are we out soon? How do we manage our allies? So let me give a little bit of context for the people who are listening so that they don't just dismiss what I have to say, because I get that a lot just because they're like, you're too young, you're a woman, you don't know anything.
I was thinking it. I'm joking. I'm joking.
So when I served, I was a counterterrorism intelligence analyst. My focus was Iran and their proxy groups, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. I've got multiple combat deployments. I know this group intimately. I used to read Israeli intelligence, and it's just garbage, to be honest. It's literally a more general version of a CNN or Fox headline. Like, their intelligence sharing is just pathetic. Anyways.
For the record, that's what our whole mainstream media does in general. They don't do journalism. They read Defense Department press releases. There's a very famous example of Jake Tapper speaking to an Israeli journalist, and Jake Tapper was reporting on a press release as if it's fact, and the Israeli journalist was like, well, actually, that's just what the IDF says. We don't actually know that that's the case. So sorry to interrupt, but like, you're not wrong in your assessment there for sure.
Yeah, so I've witnessed getting the intelligence reports from the IOF saying, Iran, they're getting close to a nuclear weapon. This has been his goal, Netanyahu's goal, for the last 40 years. If you look back, and I think a lot of Americans now are getting wise to the game, but yeah, this has been his whole strategy for 40 years. He's been pressing every single sitting U.S. president to go to war with Iran. So now that we're finally at war with Iran, one of the interesting trends I've noticed is every single time America gets close to a deal, our allies do something to sabotage it. And some of the evidence I've seen that supports that is, one, the Defense Intelligence Agency raised the threat level for our ally to critical. That is the highest threat that there is for surveillance. So they're saying our allies are surveilling us. What else? And so every single time we get close to a deal, I notice a huge strike. So the first time we were close to a deal, that was when our allies dropped 350 bombs over Lebanon. And then consistently, every single time we get close to a deal again, there is another huge dramatic strike. And so right now we have 2 ceasefire fronts. You've got the ceasefire, which has the U.S. and Iran at the table negotiating for, their own shared interest. Israel is upset because they don't have a person at the table, even though, Trump's son-in-law, what's his name? He's at the table negotiating.
Jared Kushner.
Yeah, Jared Kushner, when Netanyahu comes to visit, Netanyahu stays in Jared Kushner's childhood room. Like these people are very close. So make no mistake, when the US was negotiating, that is who's representing us, the person who lets Netanyahu sleep in his childhood room.
Hmm.
And then the second ceasefire front that is being negotiated. So one of the clause one of the US and Iran ceasefire agreement is that all proxies will be reined in. So Iran has agreed to rein in Hezbollah because that is their proxy front, their proxy working for them inside of Lebanon. And the United States is intended to rein back Israeli military aggression in Lebanon. Well, we can see how well that's going. That's clause number one of the ceasefire agreement, and it is violated nearly every single day. And the new agreement that was signed in Lebanon, a lot of the local leadership are saying this is going to result in sedition, which is civil war amongst the people, because you're not protecting the civilians there. Essentially, now there are bordered off areas where Lebanese people cannot return home. And there's been over, it was 1.3 or 1.4 million Lebanese who had been evacuated.
Sure. I believe the stat I heard was our allies has taken a larger percentage of the land in Lebanon than Russia has done to Ukraine. And yet, when you compare the media coverage or the way that's depicted by our government and our media, it is depicted in two entirely different ways, despite the fact that the same thing is kind of happening in both areas there, with people clearly being
So
removed from their homes and the places. Go ahead, finish your thought.
your question is, are we out soon? Unfortunately, like you, I don't like fear mongering. That's why I started doing what I am doing, because I couldn't find any clear answers for myself. So I took it upon myself to find the clear answers and provide them for everyone else. So at the end of every Substack article I write that's daily, is I give you my 7 to 14 day outlook. And right now, my metrics for peace, that I'm not seeing too many. Like really, the only thing that's kind of flowing right now is the Strait of Hormuz is somewhat open, but we're not quite at what we were before.
Yeah.
I'm just nervous. I'm very nervous for how Iran will respond to our allies' military aggression, because they're not stopping. So eventually there will be a response, or they will shut down the strait again.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that. And that could all be happening in front of our very eyes while our media infrastructure talks about what color the reflecting pool is today, which is kind of the most frustrating part about all of that. But we're speaking with Malia here, bringing a ton of experience and knowledge to the conversation. I saw at least a half a dozen people saying they want to see more of you on here, and you and I were kind of chatting. I think we're going to make that a thing going forward. I appreciate you carving out a half hour to chat with us here, and whether it be with Flock, what's going on overseas, or what's going on domestically in the world of politics. I think you do a great job, and we're going to have you back on the show soon enough. So thank you for being here, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to it. I will give you the DFLOC 101 so that your reader or your listeners that are not just Fox Valley can begin to systematically remove those cameras.
There we go. There we go. Please get me all that information you have. I welcome that. And I'll be sending you, my thing makes clips of the talk. So anything you said here, I'll send you for your own reasons here as well.
Awesome.
Because
Thank you.
I think it's lots of great info. Thank you very much. I'm going to boot you now. You have a great rest of your day. Bye.
You as well. Bye.
Good stuff there. So that's Malia and Carrie, two wonderful ladies helping to push back against surveillance in our neck of the woods, as well as all over the nation here. Because, as I've often stated, and I'm going to create a second link now, as I often do for anybody that wants to debrief on the other side. That's going up via YouTube for anybody that wants to comment. You also may join. Unfortunately, Facebook is the only operation that doesn't offer a capacity to join right now. But you can join me via TikTok or on YouTube if you want to share your thoughts about what you heard. Your thoughts on whether it be the flock cameras, our relationship with our allies in the Middle East, what we're seeing take place in Milwaukee. And by the way, the specific protesters I was talking about, for those of you that weren't around during the Biden years, I was willing to call out the Biden administration for the authoritative nature in which they were breaking up the protests at UW, right? Or anywhere across this nation surrounding what our allies were doing in the Middle East. Now, these same cameras that I've been talking to you guys about for about the last month or so are being used to monitor people that take part in those protests, follow them, develop routines, see what they're doing, be able to know where they're going before they go there. When I talk to you guys about predictive policing and how our allies use flock cameras in Palantir in order to determine um, who's going to be a problem for them in the future, you are starting to see that take root right now. NSPM7 is real. And other than Ken Klippenstein, a wonderful investigative journalist, and the handful of people who actually report on what he's talking about, you do not see a lot of people talking about it. So NSPM7 is essentially a set of rules that the government is going to be able to use to determine who's Antifa before they become Antifa. And something tells me that part of the metric for determining that is going to be who took part in protests against our allies and what they were doing. So we'll see what happens. Hal says, notice this in the 90s. Every time there was a serious peace effort, suddenly new settlements would open up in Gaza. I see. And like, that's the kind of historical context that I am lacking, but that I don't doubt for a second. And that more importantly, in the years prior to social media, all you would get a reporting on, it would be a 30-second blip on a newscast saying, oh, these settlements popped up in Gaza, but trust us, there's reason. Israel or our allies have the right to defend themselves. And that was it. And that was it. I'll never get it. But now that this information is available, now that this information is readily accessible, although heavily suppressed, depending on the platform that you use, how many people are ready to wake up? I oftentimes wonder if I had done a show in the mid 90s, would I have been able to speak about it as enlightened as I am today, or would I have been more of a clueless American? Because I had to grow into this kind of mindset. And I would always joke because I would wonder, would I still be anti-racist? Would I still be an ally of the LGBTQ community? Would I still be the kind of person I am if I had been born 50 years ago? And you go back 50 years and you see the people who are putting the flowers in the barrels of people's pews, and I'm like, oh, okay, that just would have been me back then. But it's easy to think that way. You don't know, depending on the information you had available to you at the time, if you would have been able to get there. I met a girl who was essentially raised in an Alex Jones cult a couple days ago, and what it took for her to be able to break free from that line of thinking. And I sometimes wonder if without social media, without the access to the information outside of how the mainstream presents it to you, would you have the capacity to be able to think about things the way you do? And how it seems like you were catching on to stuff even then, which is definitely a skill. I know Cynthia, who is still in touch, she's going through some personal issues right now. She is going to be a more thorough part of this show in the near future, though. Is another one of those type of people that kind of just sees through the noise and is able to call it out for what it is. And I'm hopeful that more people kind of find themselves aligning that way and kind of falling in line from that perspective. Sensei says, think about boomer ideology to a certain extent per capita, because Hal is a boomer. Sensei, see, that's the thing. You can't even paint with the broad brush generationally. You can say per capita, sure, but there's no way to say in its entirety that it would be able to work that way. But that's at least my perspective on matters. What else do we have here? Malia is sending the links for how to, the information for anyone who's looking for what Malia was talking about will be available. It takes like a day for my live chat to be available via my YouTube archive. So you can either scoop up the links now or they will be available in 24 hours. All the more reason to subscribe to my Tube of You page for those comment sections there, because that is where I archive all of my old shows. Facebook ends up deleting after a month. And TikTok, I don't know, is available at any point after the fact. But if you ever miss any of my shows, they all are archived in the live section on YouTube. I am going to start saving them to the video section once I kind of get my workflow going here. Today's going to be a big day on the software front. So hopefully we can get that rolling there as well. I just want to make sure I'm not missing any comments on my Book of Faces page before I move on to my next topic here. Want to make sure. As Dennis says, thank you for the service. Deanne says the great exit Gregxit or Begxit, Ben exit. I love that. I appreciate that. Ali sharing my link tree. I appreciate that. And Deanne says, Wisconsin Public Radio had a report on Francesca Hong's recent controversial interview. I am a WPR supporter, but not surprised when they glossed over the most issues and went straight to playing commentary from someone basically calling her anti-Middle Eastern allies. No, exactly. That's a Journal Sentinel did the same thing. Wisconsin Public, everybody's searching for the buzzword headlines there. And it's no coincidence that all the liberal established media is talking about the Francesca Hong Hassan Piker interview through the same lens as conservative media, because it's two sides of the same coin. And I know that bothers a lot of you, but unfortunately, it's the reality that we are faced with. I keep thinking that I can use my fingers on my iPad, and I can't. Jim says, welcome to the Minority Report universe. Exactly. Like we're there. We done been there, but we're definitely there now. C7557 says, I was radicalized through the green sheet of Milwaukee Sentinel when AIM was featured, an American Indian movement. I'm not familiar, but I'd love more information if you have it. See, let me know. I honestly, I don't know what you're referencing. Herb says, see, that's why we need all of those data centers to save Ben's shows. Yeah, exactly. Got to compile that information. They're going to make an AI, Ben. It's like, our allies have a right to defend themselves. We got a new person here, Mr. Gwade. YouTube used to be so much better for streaming when everything was directly integrated through Google Plus. Now it's third-party software complications, mixed max. I don't even want to deal with it. Well, I mean, we do the best with what we can, you know, but I hear that. I am going to be switching off of StreamYard to OBS in the near future. I don't know if that's going to make it better or worse for some of you, but we're going to figure out how all that looks as we move forward. Keep in mind, I am still learning as we're going here through this process. Sensei says, imagine if data centers were nationalized. Violet says, I used to love Google Plus. I never used it, although everything's changing for the worse. I know, to bring it into the world of childish things, have you guys seen the whole concept of you will own nothing and like it? Sony just announced they're not even doing it in the dead of night. Need a sip of pop, excuse me. Need a little caffeine jolt here. Sony has announced in broad daylight, they're not even trying to hide that they're doing it. Starting in 2028, you're not going to be able to buy physical products anymore. It's all going to be digital. So when they decide to turn off your servers so that you don't have access to this stuff anymore, and then you have to buy newer versions of it, even though you already bought it and own it, you no longer have access to it anymore. I saw one guy online that I have to echo the sentiment. He said, if buying no longer implies ownership, then piracy no longer implies stealing. And I'm here for that attitude, because when I saw that, it's just another one of those things that, like, you can tell the clamps are being applied. Will Ben create a lookalike avatar? Not if I have anything to say about it. And like, what's funny is The Atlantic has an article out yesterday saying something is happening to the Democratic base. Like, it actually is kind of wild to me that we are living through a cost of living crisis. We're watching our money go to our allies in the Middle East. We're watching surveillance take over our lives. We're watching businesses tell us we no longer own the things that we are buying anymore. And yet, mainstream news sources are going to sit there and act flabbergasted that establishment candidates are losing all across this nation right now. And it's a long way away from there being some kind of DSA majority or anything like that. But Um, what's funny is the show's called Outside the Box, and when I started, there were a lot less people talking the way that I talked, and now it's almost like the way that I've been thinking for a lot of my adult life is starting to become a lot more mainstream, what feels like overnight, and I'm not complaining. If I sound like a voice in the crowd instead of a voice standing out among many, I would prefer that because that means we're closer to actually enacting change. But the idea that the Atlantic with a straight face can look at the way the elections are trending, look at the frustration that's out there, look at the negative trajectory, regardless, as the new jobs report is just saying we're at 57,000 people. In 3 months, I'm sure that'll be edited either up or down. You can never trust the immediate jobs numbers, but people are wondering what's wrong. I obviously have a new lens through which I look at life, just having recently been laid off. And I was joking with friends of mine that I was looking at the people working at Walmart, and it wasn't kids and it wasn't the elderly. It was people my age stocking shelves, like good fit people. And it says to me that if you're doing that, that all of the other options are taken. And there aren't a lot of things out there right now for people that weren't already in their careers. And thankfully, I had a soft landing for my situation here. And it always feels like I come out smelling like a rose when all of my peers around me. Believe you me, there's an element of survivor's guilt that comes with life, even when it works. But um, I am noticing things now because I'm looking at life differently. And things aren't trending in the right direction. And when it's wall to wall coverage about the lackluster audience at the state fair in DC and the color of the reflecting pool and Donald Trump's corruption. Donald Trump made $1.2 billion rug pulling all of his moron followers that bought his Trump coin. You know what? Let them use their money the way they want to use it. They're dumb. Whatever. They got tricked. Cool. Like they're allowed to do that. If Donald Trump wants to make $1.2 billion, I've stated 1,000 times over, we're in a post-corruption society. You know what bothers me more? Elon Musk becoming a trillionaire, Jeff Bezos gouging us and not paying his workers enough. If you're mad about Donald Trump, be mad about the entire system because rug pulls, hedge funds, and ill-gotten gains are all over society. I am not making excuses for Donald Trump. He's a corrupt piece of crap. Here's the beautiful part about that. The next time Fox News and MAGA is talking to you about um, some Hunter Biden scandal or Nancy Pelosi's stock trading or whatever the situation is, just look at them, say, waka waka, MAGA, we're not taking you seriously anymore. Now get the hell out of the way. We're going to improve the cost of living. Like, it's not rocket science how you beat these people, and talking about all this stuff that doesn't matter and then wondering why democratic socialists are beating you is not your path forward. We got a couple of comments here. Sensei says, have you noticed the class framing has been growing significantly since 2016? Absolutely. Absolutely. I've used that as an example a dozen times over. You can find a clip of Bernie Sanders in the election in 2016 saying, we got to break up the big banks. Big banks are consolidating. All these industries are consolidating, and they are helping to jack up your prices through lack of competition. And Hillary Clinton goes up there and goes, breaking up banks won't fix racism. And yeah, you're right, it won't. But you know what banks consolidating does? Screw everybody over. White people, black people, Asian people, Native people, Hispanic people, Greek people. It doesn't matter. You're getting fleeced by them. And Democrats were willing to run on identity, and they're still trying to pull it, by the way. It's not working the way that it used to, especially because a lot of those minority groups are running as leftists. So you can no longer paint the Bernie bros as bigots because it turns out the Bernie bros were the people that were making sense 10 years ago. Glad everybody else is jumping on board now. But the fact is, the old way of thinking is no longer going to fly anymore. Jay says trying to design dashboards and tap at the same time is proving to be difficult. I believe that. I appreciate you for being here, though. Craig says, were you on TYT before, trying to figure out where I saw you? I did interview Cenk Uygur twice, once when he was running for president and once when I was doing my show live from the RNC in Milwaukee. But I've never been on the Young Turks. No. I did radio in Pittsburgh. I don't know where else you would have seen me. Maybe that's why you think, but there wasn't any video of that. Um, yeah, no, I've never been on any of the stuff. I've been on WCPT in Chicago a handful of times. I don't know if you listen to them. They identify as progressive radio. But that's the only other thing I can think. D says Fox News was already saying that Trump did it better than Hunter, according to business dealings. Exact. There you go. So yeah, Hunter Biden was a 4-year story. Trump is just a good businessman. Like, it's actually embarrassing. And the liberal news networks are more than happy to gobble it up because then it doesn't require them to focus on the failings. Again, farm bankruptcies have shot up 700% under Donald Trump. It is significantly worse than it was under liberals. Farm bankruptcies also went up in 2023 and 2024. So when you're voting between everything sucking at a slower rate and just quickly going to sucking, it's hard to convince people to show up and start voting for and start voting for people. That's why they keep losing, and I swear to God, it's by design. Can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. But nevertheless, I digress. But I think it's worth I think it's worth having these kind of conversations here. So I appreciate all the comments. I just want to make sure. Oh, I was on Political Voices Network for like 4 months. I think I'm going to be back on there. The freaking owner hasn't gotten back to me yet, but we're going to get there soon enough. And so to kind of, and I wanted to get to this, these last 40 minutes are going to be a little ADD stricken. If you're joining halfway through, in the first half hour of the show, I was talking about energy rates and the fact that New York and Virginia are being told to conserve energy in the middle of a heat crisis, because we do not have the capacity to generate enough energy because Donald Trump and his drill baby drill mentality has left no room for solar energy to develop. While Spain and China are literally developing excess energy to the point where the companies that are investing in them have stopped because there's no way to make a profit because of how cheap energy has become. But so yeah, that might be it, Craig. I was on Stephanie Miller's show once or twice while I was with PBN. But so to tie that conversation together, there is one county in Virginia. So Virginia is telling their people, don't use your air conditioner. Now they are telling their schools to conserve energy during the summers and during the school year because they have 37 data centers being built and the data centers need access to that energy. This is why liberals lose, not because conservatives have good ideas. Objectively, the American right has nothing to offer you other than grievance and race-based politics. There is nothing else that they are doing other than that. And people that are pretending otherwise are being dishonest with themselves. Democrats run Virginia right now, and they are telling their schools to conserve energy so that they can run the data centers that nobody is asking for. That is why Democrats lose. Not because Republicans beat them in the marketplace of ideas, but because enough people wake up to the fact that Democrats don't mean business either, and on election day, they'd rather just do something else rather than show up and vote for any of this. I'm not even saying that's the right attitude. As somebody who showed up and voted for Kamala Harris, despite the fact I think that she was a trash candidate. But I'm saying I get it. I'm saying I understand how we got there. And I'm saying pretending like something other than that is happening is going to result in them losing again. Case in point. Hold on 1 second. Let me get this queued up before I do it. We're going to try something new on YouTube. And I apologize to TikTok. Potentially tomorrow, we're all going to be on the same screen here. But allow me to see if I try and do this for my first time here. So Matt Stoller, who is an antitrust expert from the Obama regime, who has been on my show before as well, one of the louder voices surrounding the cost of eggs. I'm going to try. Is this the I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. So if I do it this way. No, okay. You know what? I'm gonna have to look into this in my time off the show. There is a way for me to share the screen with you guys that I will be able to do tomorrow. I'm just going to have to read it to you today. Um, I was one of the loudest voices in 2023 about the cost of eggs. I was bringing people from Farm Action on my show. I was bringing Matt Stoller and antitrust experts on my show to talk about the fact that the cost of eggs was not going up because of a bird flu, and it was going up because there are three major companies that are consolidating all of the rest of the egg industry, jacking up our prices to astronomical levels and not doing anything about it. Now, brief history lesson. The cost of eggs for progressives in 2023 was shorthand for the cost of living. So people would talk about the cost of eggs, and what they meant was the cost of everything, the cost of your apartments, the cost of all of your groceries, the cost of quite literally going to do anything was shooting through the roof because every industry has consolidated at this point. Democrats told you that was a conspiracy theory. Republicans told you it was because of Mexicans or something. I don't know. Their logic is stupid. I've stopped paying attention to it at this point. And progressives were the one telling you that it was a consolidation. Donald Trump shows up. The egg companies bring the prices down lower through no fault of Donald Trump, just because they felt like doing it. And of course, Republicans say, oh, you guys were complaining about the cost of eggs. Cost of eggs are down. Bada bing, bada boom. Problem solved. We're idiots. Flash forward to now, and Matt Stoller's most recent edition of Big via Matt Stoller. Crime pays. The egg bandits made 1,000 times the fine they just paid for price fixing. I'm not going to read you the entire article, but here's an excerpt. A few days ago, 18 states and the DOJ Antitrust Division signed a series of decrees with three major egg producers, Cal-Maine, Versova, and Hickman's Egg Ranch. The largest egg producers in the country. The allegation backs the hard-to-refute evidence, including quotes from CEOs, which I read on the show. Is these entities operated a naked conspiracy to manipulate the price of eggs between 2022 and 2025. That was exactly the time the bird flu on poultry farms was ripping through the supply chain for egg production. Readers of this site won't be surprised at this news. Last year, Big published an investigative series called Hatching a Conspiracy, in which Basil Mazar-Bush, also who has been on this show, discussed what looked like a conspiracy. His argument was that egg producers were using the avian flu crisis as a veil to raise prices. Basically, consolidation had created concentrated power, and the shock of the flu let them exploit it. He heightened the role of Cal-Maine, the industry's bellwether, as well as the history of antitrust violations in the industry. While most normal people at the time thought someone was likely scamming them, that was not the message you heard from the industry, elite media, or economics. Throughout the alleged conspiracy, industry executives and analysts were saying that there was nothing to see except a supply shock of disease killing lots of hens. As one industry executive put it at the time, it's all just supply disruption, act of God type stuff. They have now been fined, and that fine dwarfs in comparison to what they fleeced us for over the course of 3 years. And yet the MAGAs are more than happy to tell you that it was because of Donald Trump, and liberals are willing to tell you that it was because of the avian flu, and nobody is going to talk to you about the real causes of the issue, which is why even when the inevitable blue wave that is coming in November does ultimately end up coming, it will be short-lived. Nothing good is going to come from it. And it's due to an objective interest in not trying to be better, in not acknowledging the obvious shortcomings in our economic system that are blinking us in the face. I hate that I have to quote this guy because he's an awful human being, but Russell Brand often says, if every time there is a health-related crisis, billionaires get rich, and every time there is a wartime-related crisis, billionaires get rich, and every time there is an energy-related crisis, billionaires get rich, and every time there's an avian flu-related crisis, billionaires get rich. We're inevitably going to be living in a society where we are dealing with some kind of crisis in the name of billionaires getting rich. And so when every time there's an avian flu, mark my words, the oh my god, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of it already. What's the worm that's gonna eat all the that's gonna kill all the cows? That's the flesh-eating worm. I'm blanking on the name. It's not ringworm, screwworm. When the screwworm inevitably takes out a certain percentage of the population of the bovine in this nation, thank you for the people that did get there. I wouldn't have got. I don't know that I would have. I appreciate you having my back on that. They're going to jack the prices 4 times beyond what they actively have to do. And people are going to say, but Ben, the screwworm and Donald Trump is the reason that X, Y, and Z happened. And inevitably, we're all going to get gouged. And there will be a story at the end of 2026, maybe first quarter 2027, where I'm talking to you about record profits in the meat industry, despite the fact that the screwworm is happening. Because remember, acts of God do happen. COVID was real, right? There was a shutdown. The entire economy shut down, and we went from having no demand for anything to having plenty of demand for things, right? There should be a price increase with that. The government exists to make sure that that price increase is commensurate with the struggles that those companies are going for. If the price increases result in record profits, then that means that the companies are gouging us. Just basic econ 101. Because if they experienced losses in profits and yet their revenue stayed the same, the profits would go lower. If in 2019 you made $1.2 billion and in 2026 you made $1.2 billion plus inflation, I know you're not supposed to make the same revenue every year, but that would be an acceptable way for things to move forward, right? Because now you know you're not being gouged. Prices went up because they have a business to run and they need to make sure the employees are paid and the benefits are paid out and the investments in the company are made and yada, yada, yada. But the profits wouldn't be record profits. Democrats, the entire time they were in office, refused to talk about corporate greed. And again, they have no levers right now. And they are more than content to tell you that the reason that your cost of living is so high is because of Donald Trump's tariffs and the war in Iran. Both true statements, but objectively not the only thing contributing to the cost of goods. And yes, I have seen the beef prices this past year, CKK. It's not looking good. That's why when the Atlantic puts an article out there that says something is happening to the Democratic voter base, no, something isn't happening. People are seeing that there are Democrats out there that are going to tell you you don't know what you're talking about, and this economy is rocking and a rolling. And there's going to be Democrats out there that tell you that this system is rigged against you, and if you vote for me, I'm going to bring it down. It's how Graham Plattner is able to overcome a tattoo scandal. It's how Zoran Mamdani is able to show up and blow through any claims of anti-Semitism, and I say this in a tongue-in-cheek manner, overcome the scandal of being Muslim in America while running for office. There's a reason why these people are able to win despite having questionable tweets in their past, scandals that would oftentimes bring them down. The way people talked about Trump, people are now talking about the DSA, because the difference between Trump and the DSA is one of those two entities actually intends to address the cost of living, and one of those two entities is determined to ban trans people from every walk of life. And I'll let you guys pick which one of those two is which. And the Democratic Party shows up and says, you know, the DSA, they are here cheering and championing Gaza and the horrible atrocities that are being perpetuated against them. Meanwhile, a bunch of their base identifies as LGBTQ, and Gaza most certainly wouldn't support them. They're still trying to identity politics their way out of a situation that identity politics, austerity politics, whatever word you want to use to describe it, just isn't going to work anymore. Nobody gives a single crap about the debt and deficit when the rent is due. And so the idea that Democrats would not create some kind of economic system to benefit the people that are economically struggling right now in the name of being scared of blowing up the debt and deficit, while Republicans show up and just give Elon Musk all the money, is no longer going to fly anymore. It's not a mystery as to why the Democratic Party is failing. And in reality, to bring it to the state of Wisconsin, why you're seeing a DSA candidate running for governor be the highest ranking on the list right now. Not to say she's going to come out on top, and I can't stress enough, every single candidate will be here. Kelder Royce is scheduled for 10 a.m. on Monday. Outside the Box Unfiltered, be here for that. It's going to be a good conversation. We're going to have this talk. Is there room for the meet me in the middle liberal in 2026 with the masked Virgin Army and our fourth bout of tax cuts and wanton corruption coming from the White House? And liberals are trying to show up and say, we have to find a way to reach some of the GOP voters. Explain to me one example of how the GOP has tried to convince someone like me to vote for them in the past 15 years. Explain to me why I, as a human in America, would look at what the GOP is doing and be like, you know what? I can tell they're trying to meet me where I am, and I think there's a way I can see to voting for somebody like this. Explain to me why liberals are required to do that, but conservatives seem to be able to run as far to the right as to their heart's content and not have to worry about it. Almost said the phone number there. Old habits die hard. Let's see what we got. Clean and Sober Nation, or Susan says, iceberg lettuce is now $2.28, Jesus, per head of lettuce, or per head on average. It's everything now. It's everything. Everything is so expensive. And I've talked about this before. Jim says he only remembers a minute and a half of Occupy Wall Street. The Tea Party is still getting their airplay. Exactly. Exactly. Because the Tea Party could be painted as lunatics. Meanwhile, if the Tea Party would just drop the race crap, the Occupy Wall Street people would be on board with what the Tea Party was. I call it the left Tea Party. What's happening right now? It's funny. It's a play on words. You get it? The left Tea Party? Lefty Party? It's good, right? I'm a clever dude. But that's what we're going through right now, and Democrats are doing whatever they can to stymie it. And I'm telling you right now, it isn't going to work. You can take me off the air, you can't eliminate the message, and I'm one of thousands at this point that is echoing the same message. It's time for change. This ain't gonna cut it anymore. And until we have people in place that are talking that same way, we should expect more of the same to happen. It's no coincidence. But Bernie, back at the end of 2021, early 2022, which for those of you that struggled to remember, proposed the what did he call it? The End Corporate Greed Now Act at the beginning of 2022. Right after COVID happened, because we were already, Google it. Google, and not now. Wait 20 minutes till I get off the air. Then go Google it. End Corporate Greed Now Act. I'm going to type it in the comments right now so you can copy and paste it. End Corporate Greed Now Act. Go ahead and look it up. What he did was he has a large conversation at the beginning, and I'm going to just make up numbers here, but the numbers are in there, and you can tell me I'm full of shit when you go and look at it. He said, we are being fleeced by these companies. And what he did is he picked 30 of the largest companies in America, and he said, look at the profits that they were making between 2014 and 2019. And then you go and look at them. He goes, okay, now look at the profits that they made through all of 2021. Shoots through the roof. Not even just doubled, so much, 3, 4, sometimes 10 times the profits that some of these major companies across all verticals. We're talking Amazon, Walmart, Exxon, Verizon. Go through the list. It's just every possible healthcare companies, every single vertical. You look at 2014 and 2019, then you look at 2021. It'll make your head explode. He proposed a 95% tax on the windfall profits, meaning if your average profits between 2014 and 2019, we'll just use round numbers, were $1 billion. And then your profits in 2021 were $2 billion. What he proposed in the End Corporate Greed Now Act, again, when Democrats had a trifecta, Republicans can get Reaganomics across the finish line. Here's what happens when Democrats have trifectas. He proposed a 95% windfall on the excess profits, meaning if you averaged $1 billion from 2014 to 2019, the first $1 billion you made was taxed at the normal rate that you were used to paying, and those are the profits that you made. Anything above your average profits, he deemed to be viewed as price gouging. And he said, we're going to tax that at 95%. And then he didn't leave it up to the imagination of how that money was going to use. It's not like we're going to tax that money at 95%, ship it off to Ukraine. No. What we're going to do is we're going to create a rebate system, and we're going to start funneling monthly checks into the American population's hands. We're going to take that excess profit, and we're going to help the American population get through this cost of living crisis until these companies decide to bring their prices back down. Not only did it not pass, the Democrats refused to even bring it up for a vote when they had a trifecta. Waka waka, Blue MAGA. This is why we're dealing with Donald Trump right now. Look up the statistics. He said that we could generate $300 billion just on the, $30 billion just on the top 30 companies in the way that they were gouging us, let alone what all of the other companies were doing the entire times. This isn't rocket science here, guys. This is why the Democrats are losing elections, and this is why we're dealing with this Trump stuff. And the idea that the mainstream media would rather vilify the people that are finally starting to talk the way that a handful of Democrats have been willing to talk since the beginning and say, well, who the hell's going to vote for it? That's what's funny is Fox News is basically a walking, talking advertisement for the DSA at this point. But the idea that the Democratic Party, rather than embracing this, is trying to paint the people doing this as some kind of fringe element of the party that is not indicative of what the party as a whole stands for. Let's look at this. When Democrats say, look, the DSA is going to have to moderate a little bit, otherwise I don't think we're ever going to be able to win these elections. And Jen, thank you for all of the messages. I see what you're doing there. I appreciate what you're doing. This is Will Kane. This is Will Kane. He's a Fox News host. I'm going to read to you now what was on his page, and he's sitting here with a disgusted face. Like, can you believe this? Medicare for all, college for all, housing for all, 32-hour work week, tax the rich, Green New Deal, free Palestine. Sign me up. We got the money to do it. You know what's funny is a regular listener of mine posted America and then posted Norway and showed the difference in living. And I looked under the comments at what he posted because I made a joke comment like, be careful not to say that too many times. Your radio station might lay you off. But I looked at the comments underneath and everyone said, now show me population size and tell me that's doable. And I would go under their comments. I say, population size has nothing to do for it. I said, look at GDP per capita. That's the number you need to look for. America trounces everybody in GDP per capita. This country makes money hand over fist, but we'd rather invest it in our Defense Department and making Elon Musk the first trillionaire rather than these principles. Fox News wants to run this up the flagpole and say, isn't this terrifying that they want to make sure that you're housed, fed, and healthy for the rest of your life on Elon Musk's dime? And the Democratic Party is not seizing on that in any meaningful way. They are characterizing the DSA and Democratic leftists as crazy people that don't know any better. And I'm here to tell you right now, nothing could be further from the truth. That's the platform that wins you elections. And you're going to watch it happen in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Maine, in Pennsylvania, in California, in New York, all over this country. This is the platform. Colorado on Tuesday. There's probably more that I can't remember. You're going to watch this happen everywhere. And it's not because people are radical. It's because we are realizing that every other industrialized nation on the planet already has it. We got bombs. Let's trade the bombs in for something that makes sense. Jake says, does it also say taco truck on every corner? Yeah, right. Right. And gumdrops fell from the sky. And all the lampposts drizzled chocolate down. Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. It's like Sean Penn in Team America when he talks about visiting the Middle East and the way they portray him. Just a Wisco girl says, I believed in Bernie back in 2016. A lot of people in my social circle that said he was a socialist whack job, but his rationalism even back then is crazy. It makes me so sad he has spun this way. Exactly, and it makes me more sad they got in his way because again, we can't live in an alternate reality, but in a reality where Democrats get out of the way and let Bernie win in 2016 and inevitably just beat the shit out of Donald Trump in the general election. MAGA's done at that point. We're not dealing with any of this. We have moved on to bigger and better things, and we're dealing with actual societal issues. As long as we find ourselves debating whether or not trans people should exist, or whether or not using the frickin' sun to power society is not obviously the best way to move. As long as we're arguing about the stupid ideas, we're never able to do the thing that Democrats like to do and nibble around the edges to make things perfect. I said it in the short that I did, and I said it to start my stream off today. America's the Death Star to the world. A lot of us are living paycheck to paycheck, but as my Republican friends always like to point out to me in my life, they're like, Ben, technically you're part of the 1% of the world, even when you're struggling. And I'm like, I get that you're right, but you're also making, like, I understand you're making that argument in just the most bad faith way that is possible. But it is true. Relative to the rest of the world, we have handled a lot of problems. Most of the problems that we deal with as Americans today are much like my career, self-made. We are able to deal with a lot of these problems and deal with them very quickly, and we are allowing the same, not going to call names, less educated people to drag us back into these cyclical arguments and not move forward. And as long as both the Democratic elite and the Republican elite are going to paint the left as the crazy people in this conversation, when they objectively have the popular policy that has already been implemented successfully around the world, this is a party pushing back against the establishment. And when I see Caller Ben saying he's going to continue to vote for MAGA because he won't vote for communism, because they can't call it socialism anymore because that's not scary anymore. One of the loudest voices on my former show saying that he can't stand the duopoly, and then a party shows up outside of the duopoly. It's like, well, they're radical. No. They're reflective of what the rest of the world is already doing, and a lot of us are already too propagandized to notice. It ain't hard to recognize this stuff here, guys. Kristen says socialism is a slur. How can progressives overcome this to win elections, especially in Wisconsin? I'd say you just highlight the victories. I'll never be able to prove it, but I think outside the box radio forum doesn't exist because I have a knack for describing socialist policies in a way that don't sound radical. I'm a freaking far leftist that people said, you're a moderate, you're a centrist, you're really good. I am good at looking at topics from both sides of the aisle because I try and do an honest day's work when I do this job. There ain't nothing centrist about my mentality, and yet most of my listeners up until recently thought I was a moderate. Why? Because the way I present socialist ideas are presented in a way that makes sense. And for the record, and Kristen, I know we're on the same side. I'm not coming at you on this, but when most people in America say socialism, they don't even actually know how to define it. I would argue most people who are saying that they are voting for socialists are not voting for the workers to seize the means of production. I'm not saying that mentality is not out there, but I'm also saying most people aren't voting for that. They're voting for the tax rates that existed in America between 1945 and 1983. Go ask a boomer, did socialism provide you your life? And see how mad they get. Go tell a boomer that You grew up on 70 to 91% tax rates, which you deemed socialism. So you're telling me that the economy that was so great that you're willing to vote for a guy who says, make America great again, your life was built on socialism. He'll go, I'm a bootstrapping, rugged individualist capitalist. Okay, great. Well, then let's just enact those exact same tax rates that you seemed very comfortable benefiting from, and let's do that again. That's how you combat this stuff. These people say it's a slur until you recognize the fact that anybody who's over the age of 60 listening to me absolutely started their life at a time when the Elon Musks of the world were being taxed between 70 and 91%, and on average, over the course of that 40 or 38-year period, paid an effective tax rate of 56%. That's not my opinion. That's an objective empirical fact. Get mad about it on your own time. I don't care. That's how it happened. So if you're turning 30 in 1983, and again, nothing happens overnight. It's not like Reaganomics was enacted and the bottom fell out of the economy overnight. It takes time. So if you were 30 years old, if you were 22 years old in 1983 when Reagan decided to start doing Reaganomics, you got the benefits of a socialist society, as you like to describe it, to help usher you into adulthood. And then once you got there, you realized that you were going to have to contribute to the younger generations. And now that was no longer acceptable. Pull the rug out from underneath them, pull the ladder up in the window, whatever kind of euphemism you want to use to describe this kind of thing. And then you get bent out of shape when people throw it in your face. Not my problem. That's how you combat this socialist conversation, because I don't think people literally mean Lenin. I don't think they mean Russia. I'm sure some people do. I don't think the majority of people, especially like young people who are just saying, I want to be able to afford to buy a house before I'm 40, even though I'm working 2 jobs. Like, I don't think that that's much of an ask in one of the most established economies on the planet. And as someone mentioned yesterday, communist China is at 90% homeowner rates. Are they all mansions? No. Do they own homes? Yes. My rent was due yesterday, paid it off. I don't have a job, and let me tell you that my unemployment was not enough to cover my rent, let alone my food. Again, not crime poverty. Landed on my feet. Don't you guys worry about me. I just can't tell you what happened yet until the ink dries. I'm going to need like 4 to 6 weeks before I can tell you guys all the exciting things happening in the world of outside the box. But it doesn't change the fact that when I graduated college, I was living on top of Mount Washington. For those of you that don't know what Mount Washington is, anytime you're watching a Pittsburgh Steelers game and you see a beautiful view of downtown Pittsburgh, that is being shot from Mount Washington. It is the go-to place. I don't know what rents cost up there now, but I'm willing to guess it's well into the thousands. I was living with 4 dudes in a house that cost $1,200 a month. This one-bedroom and apartment in Menasha is more than $1,200 a month, including utilities. That is what people are pushing back against when they are talking about socialism. They're not talking about Lenin or Stalin. They're talking about an affordable basics that was provided to previous generations, that those previous generations get mad anytime you suggest maybe we go back to the economic system that allowed them to start a life. Waka waka, boomers. D. Martinez says, my stepfather got a job with the post office in the late 80s, making $10 an hour, was able to live in a single income household, take vacations, never wanted for anything. My dad bought a house that is now current. This is me now talking. My dad bought a house in the that is in the mid 80s that is now worth over $500,000 if he were to decide to sell it, stocking vending machines and fixing arcade games. I love my dad. He's one of the hardest working people on the planet. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve everything he did, and he still is working his ass off every single day. Like, that's not the point of that I'm trying to make here. I'm trying to say, imagine stocking cigarette machines in 2026. Imagine putting Reese's peanut butter cups in vending machines and then showing up and buying a home with the salary that you got paid doing that. Jar Manny's saying my rent is higher than her mortgage, including property taxes. I own a duplex in Pittsburgh, Jar Manny, and my rent is higher than my mortgage as well. Again, I have a workaround for that too. Can't comment on it. I am moving at the end of August. I have an awesome opportunity that I'm going to take. I will still be in the Fox Valley, um, but going to be significantly cheaper. I'm so happy that enough businesses have bought into what outside the box is and the message that we put out there. Again, I always say it, like I do a show like it's impossible to buy a home and pay off 60 grand in student debt and do your dream job. And I paid off my 60 grand in student debt. I own a home and I do my dream job. Still do. I still like, do I wish it were on the radio? Sure. But honestly, the way this is going, I'm kind of excited to just build my own independent thing for the next 40 years of my life. Um, but I say all that to say I am not the norm for millennials and especially not for Gen Z. I have enough self-awareness to recognize that, and a lot of people would rather bury their heads in the sand and pretend that it's just tens of millions of lazy people and not the fact that a system has completely collapsed in on itself. And the reason they are comfortable thinking that way is because companies like The Atlantic and other media organizations are willing to say, we can't figure out what's going on with the Democratic base, and the right wing infrastructure is trying to scare people with healthcare systems that have been proven to be cheaper and more beneficial to the populations that use them all around the industrialized planet. And they would rather vilify those systems rather than embrace the fact that that is what other countries are doing, and it's better for their citizens than what is. Sorry, I'm kind of behind on the TikTok chat there, guys. I'm not going to be able to take the time to catch up on there now. But I see I have friends in the armed forces who always will joke and they'll be like, "Excuse me as I take my socialism benefits." And I'm like, "Right on." We got a couple minutes left before we're about to wrap up the show. Sensei on TikTok is about to chime in. At least I think he is. We can use this as a point to wrap up the show here. What's on your mind, man?
Good morning, Ben Nation.
How are you?
Anyways, earlier I was saying is in chat. Anyways, I mean, boomers have, in general, boomers have been thoroughly propagandized by McCarthyism, right?
Sure.
And they see the world quite differently than other people will just say. And just these scare words of socialism. People have to realize the United States Postal Service, your mail, that is socialism.
Sure.
Right there. So and going back to earlier, we're talking about energy costs and these high prices. You know what would solve that? Nationalizing the energy, nationalizing oil. Because right now, we don't own oil.
Right.
Private corporations own oil, and their responsibility is to maximize shareholder value.
And what's funny is, Sensei, Donald Trump takes a 15% stake in some energy companies and Republicans don't make a peep. All you're saying is take a larger percentage.
Well, what I'm saying is that you and I
yes,
a percentage by nationalizing oil.
I'm right there with you.
We become, the society becomes shareholders, right? And that's the only way. You look at every country that does this. Look at the entire Middle East. They all nationalize their oil. And the people benefit because of it, not just shareholders. If you're not a large stakeholder in a corporation, you're not a beneficiary. I'm sorry, most of us have 401ks. That's peanuts, literal peanuts.
Absolutely.
Compared to what the major shareholders get. So, if you want cheap prices, you want affordability, maybe this idea of socialism is not that scary if you really understand it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Sensei, and we're just about out of time, so I'm going to let you go there, but I think you bring up fantastic points, and I hope you'll chime in again. And he's exactly right. And I have mentioned nationalizing the energy industry a couple of times throughout the duration of my show. Again, while people were calling me a level-headed moderate. Because as Spain has proven, as China has proven, they are generating energy at a rate that no longer even turns a profit. Cool. Then just take a small percentage of my earnings, use it to fund the energy department, and let me heat and cool my house to my heart's content. Like, we can master this stuff. It's the powers that be that can't make a profit on it that are trying to weaponize it. So with that, I think we got to put a bow in it there. Don't worry, if you guys turn on CNN right now, they are covering Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift's wedding. Sorry, that was next on my list. We just ran out of time. That probably was the most important thing happening today. I should have dedicated 15 minutes to that, but we just couldn't find the time for it. I promise we'll do 2 full hours on it tomorrow because, oh, I'm just so excited. I'm joking, of course. Please don't not tune in because of that. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the entire show today, it's going to be archived on the Minocqua Brewing Company Substack as well as the Ben Commodo's YouTube page. You should subscribe to both of those. Support Minocqua, support myself, independent creators trying to make it in a world where the media does not want you to have real conversations anymore. Big shout out to my guests. We had 2 more guests on today talking about not just surveillance in the Fox Valley, but a lot of things going on in the world of politics that I hope will be back on the show again in the near future. And of course, we talked a little bit about these energy rates from a couple of different perspectives, showing how nations around the world are handling it relative to how America does it. Lots of good stuff in today's show. Search my name, Ben Commodos, just Dominoes with a C. We will be on tonight. It is the final Ben After Dark of the night. I have to laugh. A listener, Ken, found the show for his first time last night. He said, much more disjointed than your normal show, but I did find myself laughing a lot. That's the best way that I can describe how the nighttime show works relative to the daytime show. Come join us for that. We're going to have a good time tonight. Last one of those, and we will have one more show tomorrow as well. So please do join us for that, and have a good rest of your day. We will talk to you then. Thanks for being here, everybody. And as per usual, thank you for all the support.